Elyse Fitzpatrick and Jessica Thompson. I am just stoked to have you on For Real. Thank you for making the time to chat with me today.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you for using the word stoked. Because that's a word from my Southern California childhood. So we're stoked to be here too.
Well,
Really
as you know,
stoked.
I'm in middle America, so it takes a while for California slang to get here. So it's new here. I'm just kidding. It's not. I am very excited. First, I have to tell you a belated 50-year thank you. I know I thanked you at the time, but you two, I don't know if you remember this, but 1 million years ago, you had me on front porch with the Fitzes. Do you remember this? This is another era.
Oh, I totally remember it. Yeah.
You were so kind to have. I was a little fangirly about it, and you said I could be there and be like a pretend Fitz for a day, and it was so fun.
And you fits right in. Get it? You fits right
in. Very good. Well, this is just a delight to have you on the other side of the mic because I'm really excited to talk about all things grace. That's kind of my thing. It's kind of Jesus's thing too. So we're all in the same camp. But first, a few toasts. Okay.
Yeah.
First, we must toast Elyse and Jessica, who have reached adulthood with their mother-daughter relationship healthy and strong and intact. So intact, you write books together. Hear, hear.
Yes. Hear, hear.
Yeah, that's number one. I have two more. Huzzah! Second to Elyse and Jessica, who co-host with two other family members, one of the most engaging, hilarious, and worthwhile podcasts in the universe, aforementioned Front Porch with the Fitzes. Huzzah! Cheers!
Huzzah!
And third to Elyse and Jessica, who have released a second edition, never happens, of a parenting book that has stood the test of 13 years. An entirely different world, and is still wise and helpful and true. Well done, women.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because the three of us work in various aspects of publishing, we know that that's a unicorn, what I just said.
Yeah.
Right?
It truly is. Yes, for sure. To have it's a different publisher even.
I noticed.
Yeah. To want to pick it up and run with it and let us change as we have changed over the past 13 years in some ways. Yeah.
Oh, I'm super excited to talk about that. And I want to say that out loud because we all write hoping that something sticks, really mostly for ourselves. That's what I find.
Yes.
Like I hope that in 13 years when I'm reading what I've written, I'll think, yes, this is still true. Yes, I need it again. But we really don't know. Right? We don't know what will stand the test of time. And then to be in a parenting sphere. Oh my gosh, you guys. Well done. I'm just so proud of you. And really that says you've been writing what's true. You've been writing bone deep things that will carry with us generation to generation. So I'm very excited to talk about your second edition of Give Them Grace. The subtitle is Leading Your Kids to Joy and Freedom through gospel-centered parenting. I almost cried just reading the subtitle. And I think that's that in the undercurrent of what we need so badly in all of our lives is this scandal of grace. And so to put it into our homes with our kids and with ourselves, holy smokes. Okay. Elyse, your own parenting, you say in this book, was not in line with what you're writing about. You say you parented your 3 adult children at the time. You parented under the guise of Christian parenting, but in truth, this is your quote. You say Jesus was nowhere to be found. Yeah. So tell me about pre-grace Elyse.
Jessica could tell you about pre-grace.
Yeah, maybe I should ask her.
We want to keep, you already said, we huzzah to keeping our relationship intact. I'll let my mom speak for herself.
Okay, good move.
Okay, so just a little bit of a backstory. I was not raised in a Christian home. And because of that, in part because of that, my life coming into Christianity was really a train wreck. And I had done all the things that you could think to do in the 1960s and 70s of Southern California. I'd done them all. So then, and really, really tried to destroy my life. So then, when God, by His grace, saved me, sort of out of nowhere, I thought, all right, I don't want my children to do what I did. Therefore, I'm going to make sure they don't do what I did. And because I thought that the way to do that was to give them rules, because that's what basically I really never had. I thought that if I could give them enough rules, that then their lives would turn out the way I hoped that they would. And so in my, let's say, in the sort of positive spin on what I was doing, I was trying to protect my children from the destruction that I had walked into. Now, probably a more realistic, boots on the ground kind of way that I parented was I was so ashamed by the way I had lived that I was not going to let my children shame me. And what that meant was that whenever they did anything that I thought sort of smacked of the foolish way in which I had previously lived, I was going to come down on them like a ton of bricks. And so I was not a wonderful person to live with. Now, having said that, the reason, probably one of the primary reasons that Jessica, actually my children and their children talked to me, is because I was married to Phil. And Phil, who had grown up in a home that was very, very law heavy, knew what that felt like. And so Phil was this beautiful balance, and I wouldn't even call it a balance. Phil was the salvation, humanly speaking, of my relationship with my children. Because in all of the ways that I tried to control them with all the rules and my discipline of them, he made life fun and loved them. So no, I didn't do what I say people should do in this book. And yes, my children love me. And I believe that in their own ways, they're serving Christ. But that's really because of God's grace working in a majority of the way through my very kind husband, Phil. Now, Jessica, you go ahead and
Yeah,
agree
I
or
immediately
disagree.
unmuted. Did you see that? I was like, oh, she done? I just want to say this. My mom is a wonderful mom and was a wonderful mom and was faithful to my dad and was faithful to us and faithful to live in a way that she thought was going to bring us closer to the Lord. I see all that. I know all that. And our family is actually very close. Like my brothers and I, my parents, still. So as much as she says all that, and that I will not doubt that's probably what was going on in her heart. I mean, she is a wonderful mother. So, and not just because of my dad. My dad's great. She's right about my dad. He's great. So much fun, wonderful. But we love her on her own without the attachment of the father.
Thank
Well,
you,
this is
Jessica.
we can go now, because I think you're modeling exactly what this book speaks over and over, which is, but for the grace of God, where are we left as parents, as daughters, as leaders, as children? One of the things that surprised me about this book is how Well, it didn't surprise me that I'm prideful and that I went into this thinking this will be so great for my younger listeners who are like, just starting out in their parenting. And turns out, like, by page one, I was like, oh, this book is for me. I have two teenagers, two in high school, one in 20s, two in teens. I am neck deep
Yeah.
in another wash of grace, another need of grace, another way of looking at my own self with a lot of grace. We spend a lot of time at our house currently saying, let's talk about the ways I've injured you and didn't mean to. I mean, I completely connect with you, Elyse, saying, looking back and thinking, oh, golly. I mean, one of my first reactions to your book was, why didn't I have this? Why didn't I know about this? I needed this book. So I love it that this book speaks to grandmothers with their grandchildren, grandmothers with their adult children, moms with young, mid, old, all the things, and dads too. That's why this is evergreen, I think, is because you're talking to all of us from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Jessica, I'm punting this to you, but I think Elyse will have some things to say too. You take on this idea of good parenting and good kids out.
Yeah.
Which sounds like really great math, especially in the hospital. I have a friend who just had a baby and these sweet pictures. I'm thinking, the math's starting up. If I just do all of these things right, punch in the numbers, she will turn out to be someone who loves, obeys Jesus, and just really is wearing a crown before she even gets to heaven.
That's right.
Then then children develop a will, and that gets a little sketchy. Like, well, I'm not sure if that's going to work. By the time you get to a certain age, and that's different in every family, that idea of good parenting in, good kids out just sounds like a false promise. You go one step further and you say it's contrary to the gospel itself.
Right. Yeah.
So talk to me about that.
I mean, yeah, I think you're right. We have this innate desire to parent. Wow, that's a good thing.
Totally.
I think that's a God-given thing for us to want to love our kids and to point them to Jesus and raise them in the way that we think is right. If we didn't believe it, would be really crazy that we put a book out on parenting.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
We think there's a good way to do it. But I think what we then do is say, if I do it the right way, what then that means is my kids will end up not like what my mom was saying, not making any bad decisions, not having to go through what she went through. We really are relying on ourselves. So it's this parenting covenant of works. And the gospel obliterates covenant of works all over. And that's actually good news for us. That feels scary. And it is scary in some ways, but it's actually really good news for us because then we don't have to think it's all up to us. I mean, how unkind would it be of God to say, in order for your kids to turn out all right, you have to do everything right? Because he knows full well we can't do everything right. Because even if I say what I want to do is be a parent a mom who's always talking about the gospel, pointing my kids back to the Lord, believing in the goodness of God, believing in the goodness of grace, even if I say that and say, this is what I want to do, and I make up this little law for myself, I will fall short, even of my own laws. And so what we need, what I need, what you need, what all parents need is this dose of grace, that a covenant of works is obliterated by a good father who says, I know you can't do it. And so I'm going to come in and be everything you need to be for you and in your place. When we operate under a covenant of works with our kids, we will be demanding, not only on them, but on ourselves as well. Right? So I'm going to do my part. You do your part. Everything's going to be fine. And if you have any contact with any human being, you know that is not how it works. We're teaching ourselves self-reliance when we think good parenting and good kids out. And what we need, where there's freedom, where there's joy, where there's peace, is when we trust and rest in the goodness of our Father who loves us and gave himself up for us through Jesus. So for us not to think it's all up to us, take that burden off, because you cannot bear it. Only God can bear the burden of salvation. And so for Christian parents to really understand that, you will breathe a huge sigh of relief. There'll be less pressure on you, less pressure on your kids. You just love your kids. You love Jesus. You tell them about the goodness of forgiveness, the goodness of God. And then with open hands, you ask God to have his way in your life. And that's scary and it's hard and it might not turn out like you want to. I know that. But I also have found a deeper, more meaningful trust in my Father who takes care of me.
Thank you for saying all of that. You should preach. JK, I know you do. I want to drill down a little bit on this idea that somehow we let stick, which is contrary to what you just said. I nod when you say grace is totally sufficient for me. In fact, there's nothing better than my weakness to show the strength and the grace of God. Bring it on. And then it's 7 a.m. on Tuesday. And, or even worse, 11 a.m. on Sunday.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we're all coming in looking cute. And I remember so many Sundays when I could feel this like pressure cooker on the way to church. And I knew it. I knew that I have about 5 miles left to apologize to my family before going into a corporate worship service. Is this only me? Something, especially on Sundays, that I lose myself. And so, my family got really used to apologies from mom on Sunday on the way to church. There's something insidious going on and I know that this is not an accident, but there's something gross that happens, particularly perhaps in places of faith. Mm-hmm. I've met with many moms over the years, had the honor of speaking on, I was on the MOPS circuit for a decade. And I can hear in the conversations around the table, this panic of I'm supposed to do this. This is on me now. What are you doing about this? The way you two write about these conversations is so different. It's so different. Much more my own surrender with Jesus in the morning, my own and throughout the day, much less sticker chart. Not that there's not a place for charts. Okay. I potty trained using a chart, but that I don't hang my hat on the chart. So Elyse, maybe you can talk about that. There is something dangerous that happens when we nod our heads at the gospel of grace in a general sense, but we park it at the door with our parenting. What's going on with that?
So to my way of thinking, it's really an issue of trust. Okay. So it really gets down to who are we trusting? And look I can assume that most of the people that are listening to this podcast would say, I trust Jesus. But then, when you're on your way to church and you turn around and you look at your kids and you can't figure out where on earth they got those clothes, or did they forget their hairbrush or something, you don't know. And you are walking then into church with kids and, of course you freak out. And then you walk into church and right then, the question is not, am I trusting Jesus for my sort of eternal salvation? The question is, do I trust Jesus for the salvation of my reputation and my success? And so it's really an issue of trust, which is why everywhere we look, there are, supposedly new ways coming out. And I've been a Christian long enough that I've already heard it all. But, there's gentle parenting, and then there's being a trad wife, and there's all these different things. Like, what's the latest thing that I can trust in so that I can control the narrative? I want to control the narrative about what people think. And I think this is what's really going on Sunday. I'm sure our enemy loves to just blow us up on the way to church. But what's really going on there is I want the approval of my people, of my tribe, of my Christian friends, of other Christian moms and dads. I want them to look at my kids and say, yeah, Elyse really has it going on. And that, Kimberly, that's a trust issue.
Yeah.
Because I'm not trusting that Christ's imputed perfection in my life, his you are good is enough. I need a you are good from someone else. So it's all about trust. And the question is, every time, I want to challenge the moms who might be listening. Every time you're worried about your kids, every time you're angry, just stop for a minute and say, what am I trusting in? And it's not that we don't, properly discipline our children or aren't concerned when we see them going in the wrong direction. It's that when those things sort of overtake our lives and stop us from really loving them and pointing to Jesus, it's at that point that you have to ask the question, who am I trusting in? Because I'll tell you that for me, what I was trusting in was that when I walked into church and people, particularly the pastoral staff, would say, yeah, Elyse has got her act together, that meant I was a good person. And I wasn't trusting Christ. And that, Kimberly, wanting to get people to approve of you will kill you. And it kills your relationship with everybody, including your children.
I think, can I just add something really quick? I think we know we need righteousness, okayness, rightness. And what we do in our parenting is we try to get that rightness, okayness, righteousness by having good kids. Instead of saying my righteousness, my okayness, my rightness comes from God alone.
Yep.
And we do it not just in our parenting, we do it all over the place. But as a parent, those little kids aren't into you and your righteousness. And so you will find yourself emotionally, bodily reacting to what they do. And so for us to say, what would make me feel okay in this moment? Same question my mom's asking, maybe just in a little bit of a different way. What would make me feel okay in this moment? And if the answer is to have certain people think of you in a certain way, or even yourself, think of yourself as like, see, I'm doing it. I'm pulling it off. You're looking outside of Christ for what only he can give.
Okay, boots on the ground. I can hear I'm going to be the pushback on the other side of the microphone. I believe everything you're saying, but I want you to flesh it out for me. So there's a mom or dad totally on board listening to this and like, yes, 100%. This is what I want. I want to infuse my home and my relationships with grace and with the message that Jesus is absolutely enough. No adding, no subtracting to the work he's finished. Full stop. And then their kid throws a 10 alarm fit in aisle 7 at Target. And all of a sudden, top of the priority list gets to make it stop. I want this to stop. This goes through all of our years of parenting, right? Nobody in my house is throwing fits in Target anymore. So, but the focus shifts. Yeah, well, actually, no, the focus shifts then, right? Then you find out that your middle schooler, high schooler, college is into nefarious stuff or using a resource that you have provided for ill or lying to you. The stakes get higher in some ways, right? So talk to the parent who is neck deep in this, not just taking notes and thinking, yes, I want more of this, but what do they do? 10 alarm, aisle 7.
I want to start by saying, I think one thing that we've added in this book that wasn't in the last book is we talk about the fact that your child might be neurodivergent.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes.
Yeah. So if you have a kid who is throwing a fit, having a meltdown, and it doesn't make any sense to you and it seems over the top, there are resources out there. So I want to say that first.
Right.
primarily what we're talking about is for kids who would respond typically.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Thank you for saying that out loud. Super important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I just want to say that real quick. I mean, there might be a mom whose kid is having a meltdown in Target, and all they can do is scoop that kid up and take him to their car.
100%.
And that's good.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's good. Okay. So, what I want to say to you is, in that moment, when you feel at your wit's end, when you feel lost, when you feel like there's nothing I can do with this kid, nothing's working, they've done the unthinkable, they are the unthinkable, right? At that moment, for you as a parent, you turn to Jesus. You ask him, invite him into that moment for yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we've been saying from the beginning. People often ask, so if you give your kids grace, does it change them? Does it work? And our answer has always been, well, it works in our hearts first.
That's it. Yep.
Right? So in order for you to give your kids any gospel, any grace, any Jesus, you have to be steeped in him. You have to be assured of your forgiveness. You have to be assured of your righteousness. So in those moments where you're feeling at the end, you turn to your Savior. I forget who said it, but somebody is saying, I've heard, is that God's office is at the end of our rope, right? So at the very point where we know we're done. I can't do anything with this kid. They don't listen to a word I say. I have found the history on my computer. I cannot believe what I'm seeing. All of these things. At that moment, first thing you do is turn to your Savior, who Hebrews says sympathizes with you in your weaknesses. And you come to him boldly before the throne of grace, not boldly because you've done it all right and you're a great parent and you've given them the gospel, et cetera, on and on. But you come boldly to the throne of grace where you'll receive mercy and help in your time of need. And so for us as parents, we found the internet history. Our kid continues to throw fits. Whatever it is, you go to the throne of grace. You invite Jesus into that for yourself. Father, give me a deep drink of your grace, and then help me to see how beautiful that grace is, and then impart that to your kids. That drink you get, then you turn around and share it. You realize how beautifully you've been loved. You turn around and love your kid. That's going to look different for different families. So what we're saying to you in this book, and what we hope that people hear, is in order for you to give your kids the grace that we're asking you to give, you need to receive it yourself. Remember the gospel for yourself. Remember that your parenting doesn't make you right with God. Remember that your parenting doesn't disqualify you from a relationship with God. Remember who he is. So I would say, and Mom, add to this, I would say that for those parents, stop and consider grace for yourself. And even if that's just a breath prayer, Abba, Father, I need you. If it's just a breath prayer for you to take one moment and invite God into that space in your life, invite God in and ask him to give you the grace that you need to get through.
Yes. Amen to all that. You should preach that somewhere. Along with all that, and not discounting any of that, we are not saying don't have any rules.
Right. Sure.
Or let your kids do whatever they want. Because, it's grace to you. Not that at all. What we're saying is, in the midst of you employ whatever rules and discipline you believe is correct. In the middle of that, though, we're saying, please stop. Even if it's just for a millisecond, and say, Jesus, I need you now. And yes, have rules. When children are pulling toys down off the shelf at Target, that's not the time maybe to stop and have a discussion about imputed righteousness.
That'd be cool. I'd like to watch that video.
discipline, do the things that, to do as a parent. But at some point, you've got to say, Jesus, please come into this and help me. Because what's going on when that kid is pulling toys down off the shelf at Target or any of a number of other things that children do is we feel deeply within ourselves that we've got to make them stop so that those other people stop looking at us. As Jessica said, just a breath prayer. Jesus, I need you. Help me now. And I personally am shocked at how many times Jesus answers those prayers.
Right.
I mean, who knew? He answers prayer.
Mom, reminding our kids, just like we're saying to ourselves, my parenting doesn't make me right with God, reminding our kids that their disobedience in that moment doesn't disqualify them from a relationship with God if they've trusted him. Right. So we're not just only taking the pressure off of ourselves. That doesn't mean we parent, however, and we don't pay attention to our kids and we sit on the couch and eat bonbons and, binge every single show and just ignore our kids. No. We want to love our kids and do the right thing. So in the same way, when we're telling our kids, here's the rules, we're also telling them, you need a savior. You need Jesus as well. And even if you tried to follow all these rules, you would fail, but that's okay because we have the forgiveness of a savior. That doesn't mean do whatever you want. Right. What it means is we're motivated by something different. We're not teaching our kids to be motivated by, if I obey mom and dad, then somehow God's happy with me. Right. We want something totally different than that. We don't want them just to have obedience so that they look good to us. We want them to have obedience that comes from a renewed, changed heart. Right. So the same message that we're getting for ourselves, we want to impart that to our children.
Exactly. That, I think you weave that together so beautifully in the book that this is beyond a 10-step program. You do not offer diagrams, which I appreciate because I never read those parts anyway. This is a posture, and really an open-handed posture. Long ago, I've probably said this here before, one of the best pieces of counsel and wisdom I got in the middle of parenting younger kids was physically to approach them when I internally am having an emotional reaction. First of all, my emotional health is not predicated on them. They cannot carry that. That's number one. Okay. So if I have to walk away, if I have to think about this, I have to have some time in prayer. Even if I just have to say, as you said, I need some breath prayer here, and I will return to you in a moment. Like, I needed to have the license. Someone told me, you have this permission. Like, you don't have to do everything in the moment. And then the other thing he said to me was, what if you approach them physically with your hands open? Typically, by the time we're doing any sort of moving into a difficult conversation, my shoulders are up, my hands are clenched. Even just opening my hands, that is a physical gesture of grace. It's saying, I don't have this together. I really need help here, and I want to help you. And to your point, Jessica, you don't have it together either. Thanks be to God that there is this stubborn love that is cushioning this, even this conversation, even this moment. It changes the entire temperature of the room. I'm learning in this season. Years ago, I learned a breath prayer, actually, of on the inhale, Jesus, and on the exhale, I belong to you. And boy, does that get a lot of practice around here. In part because in a large part because I need to cast out all of the options, all of the might happen. I mean, I could, you can spend your whole day worrying about that. I'm watching friends making decisions about all sorts of things with their kids, little kids, and secretly thinking, yeah, that train left the station. Like Godspeed as you control that little thing. There are things coming that will feel even bigger, and they are bigger. I remember when Anna came home one time really early on, and our kids all went to public schools, or in public schools at present. I went to public schools. Well, first I started out in a Christian school, and then I set it on fire. And then I had to go to public school with my own
Same.
Wait,
legalism,
really?
actually.
Really?
No, not literally. I think my parents wanted to set me on fire because I was becoming so judgy McJudgerson. And so that was a good move for them. So anyway, and I was a public school teacher. So I have, a lot of experience in that space. I did not have experience with my child in that space, however. And she was really little, 6 maybe, and came home and over soup asked us to to define a word that I hadn't known until I was into my late teens, early 20s. And right. And I remember Mark spitting out tortellini and being like, oh, his voice got very high. It's like, who told you the word? And combined it with your mother, talked about your mother in that way with that word. I mean, it was just, we laugh about this now, but in the moment, better believe it. Fear was really ratcheting up. Like, I've done the wrong thing. I have her in the wrong place. I don't know. We're having to talk. And that is early bird easy compared to a lot of the other conversations we've had since then.
Right.
So to both of your point, if we approach these things from a position of this is all up to me, or Jesus, you must only accompany people who are in parochial school or who have all of their things together, or you only walk with me until my kids are in 3rd grade, that is a cheapening of the gospel. And I don't want to do that. I want to remember always, you are right here. I belong to you. I need you. So thank you for writing that and saying that beautifully, because I need it every day. I'm going to have this. I never listen to my own podcast, but I'll probably listen to this one because I need a repeat by next week. Okay. A couple other things before I let you go. First, very personal question. You can decide to say yes or no or pass. New book, new era, new authors. It's been, did I say 11 years? No, 13. 13 years since you wrote this. And so I would like for you, as a daughter of the one true King, how has this message shifted for you personally since the first time you wrote it?
That's such a good question. Okay, I'll go first. When we went back through, it was a humbling experience, and God, may I never stop growing in my knowledge of grace.
Amen.
Lord, please.
Me too, please.
So much has, I don't even think I can quantify how much has changed for me. It would probably be easier to say that grace has held me. I talked about, we added 2 new chapters, one being on mental illness. And man, when we first wrote that book, I had no idea about how that could affect our children, depression, anxiety, and then went through 2020 with one of my kids that was in that was their junior year. And, I'm pretty open about this and they're okay with that. But, there were lots of nights that I went to sleep unsure if I would wake up and they'd still be with us, if he'd still be with us. So that has changed for me. I think that I had a different sort of idea of what anxiety or depression was before writing this book. And now for me, I have another idea of what that looks like and how real mental illness is. So that's one thing. There's so many. I think that I have grown because my roots have had to go deep, because God has had to keep me these last, especially 5 or 6 years. My roots have grown deeper into grace than I could have ever thought. So those are both sort of up here answers. But I will say the chapter that I added is one way that God has changed me. I think, well, I'll let you talk, Mom. Go ahead.
I would say that from the time we first wrote the book until now, I feel very much that I am more at rest.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Even when I was writing about grace, I kept feeling like I had to drive some bus.
Mm.
You know, it's
Yes.
like I gotta get it together. You know, I'm gonna. And now, I feel far more at rest. Now, that doesn't mean at all that I don't have concerns, that I'm not praying that grace would be strong in the lives of all the people that I love. But I think, again, getting back to your question, Kimberly, about fear, that there is, um, I think I've sort of gotten to this place. And well, I'm going to say at least right at this moment, maybe recently. Who knows where I'll be day after tomorrow? Of sort of being at rest with where I am and where God has me, and that, like you said, Jessica, and that God's going to hold me.
Mm.
So through all of the years, I became a Christian in 1971, which means that I've been a Christian for almost, well, I don't know how many years. I can't add or subtract. Um, over 50 years.
I wasn't going to bail you out because I'm not really
Thank
good
you.
at that either. Can I please have
Yeah,
a
I don't know.
calculator? Let's
Where's
see.
my
I'm
phone?
born
I need a calculator.
54? 54?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah. I'm sort of at rest. You know?
Mm.
I know really at the core of my being that I am loved and that my family is loved and that those people, um, God is love. And so I don't have to worry about trying to drive some bus anymore.
Mm.
I'm just sort of on the grace train. How do you like that?
That sounds good.
I just switched up the metaphor a little bit.
You may.
Yeah, well, there you go.
We're stoked to hear you switch that
Yes, I'm
metaphor. That's
stoked
awesome.
as well.
Oh, girl, thank you for joining me.
Thank
Before
you.
I let you
Thanks,
go, I have
Mom.
one quick, really nerdy question I ask all of my guests.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, maybe this is a good moment to say, I believe when you had this, we ask all of our guests this question. I ended up singing in Spanish. I don't remember. I have a very vague remembrance of this, but I ask all the guests question was a lot harder than this one. So I'm pitching you a softball.
We're grateful.
Here's my nerdy question. You two are people who write and read. I know you're both readers. Any recommendations to our listeners? What's on your bookshelf? What are things that you love to recommend for people? I'm just always curious. What's on the nightstand? Jessica, you go first.
Okay. I am currently reading a book called A Theology of Play.
Ooh. I need that.
It's an academic book.
Okay.
But I'm a couple chapters in and I'm loving it.
Okay.
I don't know the author.
It's okay. We'll look it up and put it in the show notes. No worries.
A Theology of Play.
Okay.
And then the book that I want to recommend is a book that I think last year was my favorite book. I'm going to look it up just to make sure I get this. I say it's my favorite book, and then I can't even remember the name of it.
That's a sign of a voracious reader. You can't keep it straight. I got it.
Reclaiming Quiet, Cultivating a Life of Holy Attention by Sarah
Clarkson.
Yeah.
She was just on the pod.
Oh,
that book.
So
yes.
good.
Tell me why you loved it, because I loved it too.
Well, I mean, my natural bent is to play, which is why I'm reading The Theology of Play so that I can justify it and be right with God. So Reclaiming Quiet for me, it changed so much for me. It centered me in a way I didn't know. It was a book I didn't know I needed.
Yes, that's how I felt.
Yeah. So it's interesting that the guy who wrote Theology of Play is like, I'm not a playful person at all. This is why I'm writing this book.
Interesting.
And so but the Reclaiming Quiet for me was that book, centered me, grounded me in some ways that I didn't know I needed. So
I love it.
That was one of my favorite books from last year.
Great recommendation.
Thanks.
Here, agree entirely. Also, she lives in a vicarage. Don't you?
Right. So, of course, she can talk about Reclaiming Quiet because
automatic awesome. Yeah, but she's got a bunch of little kids.
She does.
mean, she's worked for it. No, I love that book as well. That's
a great book.
We'll put this all in the show notes for our listeners.
Yeah.
Thank you. Elyse, any recommendations?
Okay, so there is a book that isn't quite released yet, but will be released within the next week or two that I am reading because I'm that special. I get books beforehand.
That's so cool. That's a good little flex right there.
The book is by Beth Allison Barr.
Oh.
Yes, entitled The Pastor's Wife.
Okay.
And I think the subtitle, forgive me, the subtitle is something along the lines of How Marriage Became the Road to Ministry for Women.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes. I have seen the fantastic cover also. Yes.
Great cover. So that would be my recommendation.
Mom,
yes.
The subtitle is How Marriage Replaced Ordination as a Woman's Path to Ministry.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you.
How Marriage Replaced Ordination as a Woman's Path to Ministry. It's fire.
Fascinating. I bet it's so good. Yeah, that's great.
Yes. So have her on.
Okay.
Kimberly.
Okay. Well, I'll tell her that you sent me.
She'll love it.
Okay. Fantastic. Very good. Go. Thank you, reader recommendations. And thank you to both of you, Elyse and Jessica. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you're doing what you're doing and you're doing in the way that you do it. That you are mother and daughter and in this together is just extraordinary. And a really beautiful story that you're writing. And thanks for revisiting all of these ideas with a few more laps around the track because they've become more powerful, really, the more you test them. When you talk about deep roots, I can see that in both of you, and I'm really grateful for it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's been an honor.